Welcome to the wonderful world of books, one of seven worlds in Seven World Productions, a subsidiary of Angelgram Music. My name is Gino. I am the sole owner of Angelgram Music and executive director of Seven World Productions. Continuing our series in the book In Search of Beauty, here is Chapter 7, Linda. I hope you enjoy this. Previously on In Search of Beauty. And so in the summer of 1965, we moved yet again, and I had to look forward to new classmates and new teachers in my senior year. I had to find another private piano instructor if I was to fulfill my dream of being a concert pianist. I had to say goodbye to Joyce, which was not that difficult. I had a harder time saying goodbye to Dr. Fink. I wondered what was in store for me in Michigan. How was I going to continue my journey toward my dreams? Would there be other females to encounter? Mostly, I just wanted to find out what was next in my life. Chapter 7, Linda. In 1965, Flint, Michigan was a bustling little town with a primary GM Buick plant, an AC spark plug factory, and a modern airport. The church my father served was a lot smaller and friendlier. In order to make up for his loss in salary, both parents hired on as substitute teachers in the Flint Independent School District. My two younger brothers were in the 10th and 8th grade, so every weekday morning we all got up bright and early to prepare for school. As a senior at Central High School, I took all of the science and math courses to finish the program I had started back in Johnstown. I quickly made friends in the choir. I was selected by the band director to MC the halftime show for the high school band at football games. I joined the chess and math clubs. I found a private piano instructor at the nearby community college extension of the University of Michigan. Reuben Johnson was the head of the music department, and he was also an accomplished concert pianist together with his wife. That fall, I attended the Flint Symphony Orchestra concert with Mr. and Mrs. Johnson playing Saint-Saëns' Carnival of Animals for two pianos and orchestra. I was very pleased with their professional performance and looked forward to studying under Mr. Johnson. In the high school choir was an elite group of singers called the Madrigal Singers. They performed extra concerts at nursing homes and elementary schools during the Christmas season. Mr. Ed German, the director of the choir, asked me to join the group and sing bass for this double quartet of singers. They were the cream of the crop at this school. The class president and soon-to-be valedictorian were members of this group, and I was well received because of my ability to sight read and memorize so quickly. I learned how to become performance ready at a moment's notice. The valedictorian-to-be, Linda Lewis, was in the choir as well as in the Madrigal Singers. She was a full-figured senior with blue eyes and Jane Mansfield-like blonde hair. It did not take me long to get a crush on this female. I think she sensed something about me and tried very hard to keep her distance. The more I tried, the worse it got. All through the Christmas season, I kept dropping hints about how I felt about her. Trouble was, she was interested in boys that had cars, and I wasn't driving yet. My father had felt it best that I learn how to drive once I finished high school, so I was at a disadvantage regarding dating girls in high school. Besides, I was very busy with schoolwork and private lessons. In addition, I got paid for playing the church organ on Sundays for my father. In January of 1966, Mr. German recommended that I audition for a chance at touring Europe with a choir and wind band. An organization known as Musical Youth International was holding auditions in Ann Arbor, and he said that I was talented enough to try and get in. MYI was scheduled to tour in England, Scotland, Wales, Netherlands, and Germany in the summer of 1966. My father drove me down to the audition, and I met Dr. Lester Mccoy, the director of MYI, who was affectionately called by his wife as Mr. Mack. She was called Mrs. Mack. Dr. Lester McCoy was born in Illinois, June 13, 1906, and received his initial musical education at Morningside College, Sioux City, Iowa, and later received his Master of Music degree at the University of Michigan. Mr. Mack has been called an idealist, a disciplinarian, a musical specialist, and a man with a rare and harmonious combination of avid interest in a cause with the background and talent to implement his purpose. You can understand why when he spoke. He once said, "I am interested in people and the person-to-person relationships we establish with them. We all know music is a universal language, so why not apply this in our dealings with people as a means toward knowing and respecting our similarities and differences?" This was the philosophy that motivated Mr. Mack, a member of the Rotarians, to be the founder of Musical Youth International in 1965, a traveling chorus and symphonic band of 100 carefully selected junior and senior students from 50 or more high schools in the USA Great Lakes area. The group has helped spread Mr. Mack's philosophy in many countries around the world. It has received praise from such public figures as U.S. former Presidents Lyndon Johnson, Dwight D. Eisenhower, and the late Michigan Governor George Romney. Mr. Mack's professional career had been varied and extensive. After supplementing his formal education with private study in both New York City and Chicago, as well as with professional singing tours, he taught vocal and instrumental music at numerous public schools and colleges. He supervised community music projects and served on the staff of State College of Iowa as music consultant. For more than 20 years, he conducted the 300-voice University Chorale Union of the University of Michigan. This congenial Irish music master, as he was known to his many admirers, believed that MYI had begun to close the international communications gap. He envisioned the constant artistic and social growth of MYI as the fulfillment of his professional career. I sang for Mr. Mack, and he said right away that he could use me in the bass section. Because of my sight reading ability, he asked if I would mind being the section leader of the basses. The only catch was my family needed to pay $600 to participate. My father never batted an eye and said of course I would go. So every Saturday in January through May, we rehearsed at the Saline, Michigan High School choir room just outside Ann Arbor. Naturally, I was the first to memorize all the music. When Mr. Mack heard that I was also an accomplished pianist, he asked me to be the assistant accompanist during rehearsals. I also sang a solo in Norman De La Hoyo's To Saint Cecilia for the sacred part of our program. We sang songs like Deep River, New Christmas Morn, as well as the Battle Hymn of the Republic. MYI was affiliated with the People to People organization. I have long believed, as have many before me, that peaceful relations between nations require mutual respect between individuals, said President Dwight D. Eisenhower. He put the ideal behind these words into practice when he founded People to People in 1956. Since that time, People to People has benefited from an extraordinary legacy of White House support. 8 U.S. presidents have served as the honorary chairman of People to People International. As President John F. Kennedy so eloquently said, the nature of People to People activities is as varied as the individuals involved. The housewife whose recipe contains the yeast of kindness, the soldier whose arms embrace homeless waifs, the doctor who heals with humility, all assert a single theme: the power of people acting as individuals to respond imaginatively to the world's need for peace. Through People to People, MYI was able to tour Europe and have the student performers reside in host homes from the community and learn from the various different cultures. MYI had plans to travel to South America, Asia, and Australia in coming years after 1966. I felt very honored to be among a chosen few from Michigan and neighboring states and looked forward to our June departure. In January of that same year, my private piano instructor, Mr. Johnson, wanted me to audition for the Flint Youth Symphony's Concerto contest. The winner would be the featured soloist with the orchestra during their spring concert in May, as well as the recipient of their 2-year scholarship at the Genesee County Community College campus in Flint. I would have the choice of either the first movement from Rachmaninoff's Concerto No. 1 or Grieg's A minor concerto. I chose Grieg because I remembered the time when I was 6 years old and my parents took us to Radio City Music Hall to watch the Rockettes perform. The featured movie was The Song of Norway, a film about the life and times of Edvard Grieg. During that movie, they played his concerto in A minor, and I loved it and remembered it. And so I took it upon myself to learn and memorize the first movement. I had 2 months before the audition. I studied hard and won the right to perform and received the 2-year scholarship. I was set for the next 2 years. I had 2 more months to polish and prepare the piece for the concert in May. To this day, I don't know how I did it. What with singing in MYI, school choirs, school academics, and church job, I was so busy I had no time to feel sorry for myself about Linda. Although I did ask her to the senior prom, but she said someone else had asked her already. So I did not attend my senior prom. I was busy memorizing a concerto, preparing for a summer tour in Europe, and playing church organ at my father's church, not to mention schoolwork at the same time. My father was so proud of me that he paid for the rental of white tie and tails for the Youth Symphony concert. Needless to say, the concert was a big success. I received my first standing ovation. Both of my parents and Neumama, my grandmother, were very proud of my work. 2 weeks later, I was boarding my first jet airliner, a BOAC, non-stop from Detroit to London. We departed at night, and when we reached cruising altitude, the sun was rising. It was my first experience with traveling through time zones. I was 17 and not considered an adult by society, but Mr. and Mrs. Mack treated me with such dignity that I felt like one. We performed in concert halls and school auditoriums throughout England and Scotland. We would finish each concert with the Wilhowsky arrangement of the Battle Hymn of the Republic to standing ovations. In the summer of '66, Europeans loved the Battle Hymn. With a 50-member choir and a 50-member wind band, MYI was creating goodwill throughout the British Isles and also later on the tour on the European continent. My mother had come on the same flight, but upon arriving in London, she continued on to Hungary to visit her parents and siblings. MYI had requested that she help arrange for permission to have MYI perform behind the Iron Curtain, as it was called in those days. People wanted MYI to make cultural inroads to communist-held countries. They wanted the people of these countries to see and experience the youth of our country in exchange for our young people to learn about other cultures. My mother was successful in negotiating with the then presiding Hungarian government for People and MYI to go there the following year. I was given special permission to leave the tour in Germany and travel to Hungary for 48 hours to visit my mother's parents and family who I had never met. The plan was that I would take a train from Wiesloch to Stuttgart, then board a plane to arrive in Budapest. I had my passport and $100 American to pay for the special Hungarian 48-hour visa upon arrival at customs in Budapest. When I arrived at the Stuttgart airport, we were informed that the flight to Budapest was delayed. After several hours, they informed us that the flight was canceled due to severe thunderstorms en route. Some of the passengers were upset and demanded that the Hungarian airline, Ibus, pay for transportation of any kind to get us to Budapest. I insisted also because my window to visit was only 48 hours. After that, I was scheduled to be back with MYI to perform in Switzerland. So Ibus put us on a plane to Vienna, Austria, and then on a bus through a little border town into Hungary and on to Budapest. The plane ride was filled with a lot of turbulence from stormy weather. This was only the second time I had been on a plane, and we were bounced around in this twin-engine plane holding about 100 passengers. After we arrived in Vienna, some people decided to stay overnight. A few of us who were desperate were put on an old VW bus and transported to the border. At the border, we were stopped in the middle of the night by a barricade. I could see a couple of large towers with searchlights and soldiers with machine guns. I now became fully aware of where I was. We all had to exit the bus. Soldiers searched everyone's luggage. Paperwork had to be filled out. Passports were collected. I never felt more exposed and defenseless than when I handed my American passport to the guard. They interviewed all of us, and when my turn came, they were surprised that an American could speak their language. I explained to them that my mother had been expecting me to arrive by plane at the Budapest airport, and that I was only going to stay for 48 hours and perform a private piano recital for my relatives who I had never met. I then provided them with my visa application and the fee of $100. The guard's eyes lit up at seeing the American money and quickly stamped my passport with the appropriate visa to visit. I silently thanked my parents for teaching me Hungarian. I knew that knowing the language and having USA money probably helped in expediting my interview. The bus made it to my aunt's apartment address in Budapest by dawn. I had lost 8 hours of visiting because of the travel time. But when I walked into the foyer of the high-rise apartment building, I ran into a man who looked like my brother Paul, and knew instinctively that he was my uncle, my mom's younger brother, Sándor, which means Alexander in Hungarian. I called to him and he came and hugged me and said everyone thought I would not show up because of the flight cancellation. We rushed upstairs to find all the relatives waking up because of the noise we were making. To say the least, everyone was thankful to see me, especially my mom. You know, it was a rite of passage, and I had succeeded. I felt like a seasoned traveler arriving at my destination. Suffice it to say, I was pleased to meet all of my relatives. That afternoon, after very little sleep and after a nice warm bath, I was taken by my mom and her sister and her brother to their parents' place, my first ever visit with my mother's parents. My granddad was 82, and my grandmother was 67. They welcomed us with tears in their eyes. I was the famous grandson from America who played concertos with orchestras. My grandmother had a piano in their tiny apartment because she had been a pianist herself. So with all the family gathered together, I played for them for 2 hours. At the end of my playing, I was enthusiastically surrounded and hugged and kissed like a long-lost relative. I was moved to tears. I somehow felt that for me, I might not see any of them ever again. As it turned out, I only saw my aunt a year later when she came to visit us in Flint. I never saw my grandparents ever again. And after my aunt's visit to Flint, I never saw her or my uncle ever again. My mother and I rejoined MYI in Switzerland to finish the tour. My mom and my younger brother Steve would go with MYI the following year to tour Western and Eastern Europe in a first ever touring concert of young people behind the Iron Curtain. Thus, many years later, I would joke with friends of mine and say, it wasn't Reagan or Gorbachev that helped tear down the wall in Germany. It was my mom in negotiating the deal to allow U.S. State Department-sponsored MYI to open up cultural ties with Hungarians that started the collapse of the USSR. If you like this episode, click like and add your comments. Better still, why don't you subscribe if you haven't already so that you may receive email notifications of future episodes. Also, check out our other worlds at Seven World Productions: the world of art, the world of faith, the world of family, the world of food, the world of games, and the world of music. Go and be inspired.